elections have for a long time been pretty much public relations extravaganzas. They only marginally deal with issues. They're mostly show. They're run by the public relations industry. It has a goal. Advertisers, for one thing, are interested in making money. But there's a general goal, and that is to create a certain kind of society, a society in which uninformed people make irrational decisions. That's essentially the structure of presidential campaigns. And it's very strikingly similar to the way the same institutions, advertisers, public relations, it's the same way they try to construct markets. I mean, if you take an economics course, you're taught that markets are based on informed consumers making rational choices. But anyone who's ever looked at a television ad knows that the goal of those who structure the market is to create uninformed consumers who make irrational choices. If markets were structured the way they're supposed to be in principle, then say General Motors, if it wanted to advertise on television, it would have a brief advertisement saying, here are the characteristics of the models that we have for sale next year. Well, that's a way to create informed consumers who will make rational choices. That's what maybe Consumer Reports tries to do. But certainly General Motors doesn't try to do that. They put there's an ad with a football hero or an actress or something with a car doing some impossible thing like shooting up into the sky or whatever it may be. Well, that's undermining markets, and it's for good reasons. That's the way you create wants. You try to delude people into pursuing what you want them to do, namely buy your car, not someone else's, and so on. And the same institutions undermine democracy in the same way. So in a functioning democratic society, first of all, we could begin with the primary system. Take, say, the New Hampshire primary, first primary. In a functioning democracy, the way it would work is that people in a town would get together in whatever form they have, town meetings, whatever it may be, and try to work out the policies that they would like to see implemented. It doesn't have to be uniform, they may disagree, but some range of policies that they think are significant. And then if a candidate, and they would either select their own representatives, or else if some outsider wanted to be their representative, let's say a presidential candidate, he would be permitted, he or she would be permitted to come to town and not to talk to the people, but to listen to them. They would say, look, here's what we think ought to be done. And if you can convince us that you're going to do those things, maybe we'll vote for you. But you should be recallable if you don't do those things. I mean, that would be a functioning democratic society. We do it quite differently. The candidate comes to town with his PR apparatus. They try to organize people to come and listen to him. He then gives them a canned speech written by his speechwriters, which are designed through focus groups and others to appeal to people. They may have absolutely nothing to do with his intentions or goals, if he even has any. He may not. And then people are supposed to say, okay, we'll vote for you. That's the first step in undermining democracy. The next step is when you go into the electoral campaign itself, and what you have is by now multi-billion-dollar campaigns based heavily on advertising, and advertising has its usual goals, not to inform people, but to delude them into following certain paths. And anyone who's paid attention to a presidential campaign sees this all the time. Furthermore, the advertising industry is completely aware of it. So, for example, after Obama's victory in 2008, the advertising industry, they give an award every year for the best marketing campaign of the year. They gave it to Obama. He beat out Apple Computer that year, meaning he was able to delude the population better than Apple was, meaning not just the person, but the whole PR apparatus that surrounds him. And in fact, if you look at the business press after that, say the London Financial Times, main business journal in the world daily, well, they quoted an article quoting executives who were euphoric about the new style of marketing that had been developed and how it would change the atmosphere in corporate boardrooms and so on. Well, yeah, they grasp what's happening. People who say they're disillusioned because the promises weren't met are misleading themselves. And first of all, very few promises were ever made. It was carefully designed, the marketing campaign, as all are, so that it's pretty vague and not too many specifics. And the specifics are often ignored because they're just part of the system of trying to bring the public to vote for me, not because I'm representing their interests and concerns, but because I've had a better way of deluding them than the other candidate. This is an exaggeration, of course. There's more to it than this, but to a pretty good first approximation, that's the way in which the general public relations system, advertising industry and others, it's the way in which they undermine markets and the way in which they undermine democracy, and essentially for the same purposes and by similar means.